I'm actually here to talk to you a little bit about employee engagement at SunTrust. And as I thought about how to put together some slides and how, what I could share with you in 18 minutes, actually what I thought I'd do is share with you a little bit about the journey that we've been on. I've been with SunTrust for 4 years now, and I actually was brought on to develop the strategy and then execute the strategy for teammate engagement. Teammates is what we call our employees at SunTrust. And it's been an interesting journey, and actually as I started to think about the journey itself, there's probably more value in the story about the journey and how it all came instead of just kind of offering up the key points and what the strategy looks like. And so as I take you on this journey, I think what might be valuable actually is to tell you a little bit about your twisted tour bus driver, which is myself, as a starter, so it gives some context. A couple key points. The first one, which is my brother actually says I have the hobbies of a 70-year-old man, but I'm a huge genealogy nut, and what that means is I love digging into the root of a problem, like really digging in and putting it over some historical context, but in terms of finding out exactly where things come from. And then the second fact, which is true for anybody that's lives in the Atlanta area, I have a horrible commute, or a very long commute. And so put these two in context, and really most of the engagement strategy at SunTrust was developed on I-75. So. But here's a little bit about the journey. As I started to think about all the challenges that we've had over the course of these last 4 years, really engaging our workforce, I kept coming back to, again, I want to keep using, kind of digging into the root of where all these problems and these ills come from. And I kept coming back to the same place. Let's see if this works. Bam. Nope. Yes. All right, so quick quiz. There's a picture here of a person. I'll take 3 guesses. Does anybody know who this person is and know it's not a president? It's not one of those random presidents. Any guesses? This here is Frederick Winslow Taylor, and he is the root of all problems. So this guy, if anybody knows anything, or kind of basic business classes, anybody that knows anything about Frederick Taylor, let me put some historical context. If you think about the American economy over time, we started out very agricultural. We moved in the late 1800s, early 1900s into a very heavy manufacturing environment. And as we emerged and kind of stopped producing things or manufacturing things for the most part, in the late 1980s, early 1990 kind of time frame, we emerged from a manufacturing into a more of a services and technology environment. But what's important to know about this guy is most of the structure and most of the way our businesses are all organized today, most of the people practices, the organizational hierarchy, this guy, anything you read about this guy, Gantt charts, industrial psychology, management consulting, basic management practices, things like performance management, they're all designed, basically business efficiencies are all built around things developed by this fellow here, Frederick Taylor. And what's interesting about this is if you do some information or do some digging on Frederick Taylor, the guy's really an ass. And I swore that would be the only time I use profanity in this. But when you look at it, when you read really about him as a person, he didn't really care a whole lot about people, which is ironic. I mean, don't get me wrong, he is accredited for most of the growth in the U.S. economy during the whole 1900s, in the 20th century. But what's interesting about it is you do some digging in, he didn't care a whole lot about people. Basically, all of the systems that he designed and the practices that he designed were all about creating business efficiencies by taking away independent thought around practices. And what's interesting about that is it's more box-like. That's how I like to describe it. But I think earlier Bill said something about how we keep talking about human capital now, and I think that's true though. Businesses are a lot like they treat their people like human capital. They treat their people like assets because they start to take their value away and depreciate those assets as soon as they join. and they start taking the value away in terms of what they're truly capable of. And a lot of that's based on the design. So if you think about structures and things that are just constantly broken, like performance management or even teammate engagement or employee engagement, they're all built around the box. And here's the reality, and this is the circle of the picture, is that people are circular. Okay, they're complex. They take a lot of energy. One of the words actually in the last slides that we looked at, I think autonomy. When you look at the values, particularly of the American workforce, you hear words like flexibility, autonomy, freedom. They're more circular. And if you think about the amount of effort that it takes to keep a circle in place, it takes a lot of effort. And actually, if you think about the value of a circle, I'm trying to do some picture alliteration here, but if you think about the value of people in general, the value doesn't come from putting them in a box. The value comes from maximizing their capabilities as a circle. And what's interesting is, so on my journey here to figure out whether or not I could create at SunTrust an employee engagement or a teammate engagement strategy that would be ideal, the reality is the answer is no. It's kind of a bummer revelation here since we're talking about how to engage a workforce. But the truth is that if you really want to truly engage a workforce, I believe you have to change the box. You have to change the box to fit the circle, not the circle to fit the box. And I think so much of the practices that we put in place are more designed around making the circle a square rather than the square a circle. And I had to write this down because I didn't want to butcher it. But Malcolm Gladwell, famous author, he wrote in The Talent Myth, and I just thought this was so striking. He said, they were looking for people who had the talent to think outside the box, and it never occurred to them that if everybody had to think outside the box, maybe it was the box that needed fixing. And it's just so true. If you think about the challenges that we face, it's because of the structure. So rather than quit my job, I decided to say, okay, look, how do I actually make the most of this? How do I engage the circle within the box as best as I can? And I think that's the reality. We talked about that actually at the last slide, is that really there is no one-size-fits-all solution around engagement. And so I want to share with you a little bit of some of the foundational items that I went through as I developed my strategy, and then some of the common sense elements as well. So here we go. The first three, I broke them into, there's 6, but I broke them into 2 sets of 3 because 3 is easier to remember. And then the first 3 are actually borrowed, and I took these from some leaders from Mars. That would be the company, not the planet. And the first thing is this, and that is capacity is finite. Now this is, I know this sounds kind of obvious, but these are, again, foundational truths. They're supposed to be common sense truths. Capacity is finite, so every time we talk about trying to get our employees to give 110%, the reality is that capacity only is maxed at 100%, right? We can only get them to give 100%, and when you start to realize that capacity is maxed at 100%, you start to kind of get that ugly truth that people aren't giving 100%. There are things that, you think about engagement programs that are designed around tapping into discretionary effort. And the truth is that we have to tap into effort before we can even get to discretionary effort. And so many of those processes that we have in place are designed to keep people from executing effort or actually producing effort. And so, again, it's just kind of a key point. There's so much talk around getting people to do more with less. The reality is again, capacity is finite. We need to get them to give 100% before we can even think about getting them to 110%. The second thing around developing the strategy that, from a foundational perspective that we looked at SunTrust, was this idea that growth knows no bounds. Again, these are the fundamental truths. And what I mean by that is the answer is out there. The answer for engaging your workforce is out there, and we just have to think differently about it. Again, in the first one, it has to be different. It can't be more of the same. It's not more and more. And that's, again, it goes back to thinking about the box versus the circle. But understanding that thinking big, here's a different concept. We talk a little bit about work-life balance. Here's another kind of reality. There's no such thing as work-life balance. It's just life, right? There is no separation. There's no delineation. And what's interesting is if you think about, even from the Aflac presentation, where they tap into the real energy, which is the last item that we're talking about here, they tap into the real energy of their workforce, they stop talking about work, right? They tap into the things outside of work. And I think when you think about creating an engagement solution that's going to work for you, you really have to think outside of work, because I think that's where the true engagement strategy is. I'm not saying it doesn't include work. I'm saying you have to think about life, not work life, because so much of the efforts that we put together are all just focused on work, and we do complete disregard to the life outside of that. And the last thing, again, a fundamental truth here, and that is energy is a scarce resource. And you think about channeling the energy of your workforce. At SunTrust, we've got 28,000 teammates. When I think about my job in terms of engaging 28,000 teammates, I really think about how do I create a healthy, productive workforce for 28,000 people, because I know that their energy is scarce. I know that the amount of effort that they can give is scarce. And so how do I channel that? And really, when you think about designing an employee engagement program effectively or doing it the right way, it's understanding that, again, that they have to take care of themselves, right? That their energy is important, and really you need to focus in on what's good for them. Those are the Mars 3. Here's the Matt 3. So here's kind of ultimately how we developed the strategy. And this is the first and foremost for us was go long. And what I mean by go long is that there's so many experts out there that think that the ticket to creating a healthy, a lot of vendors that we've run into over the last 4 years who think that the ticket to creating an effective employee engagement program is through the managers. All the programs, all the efforts, all the design is all built around the efforts. We had this aha moment in our development, our strategy development a couple of years ago, when we realized we said, okay, look, we're trying to engage 28,000 people, but we've only ever talked to 4,000 of them. We've only ever provided resources, training, survey results. Everything seemed to focus on our managerial population. So it was like, that was just stupid. I don't know why how do we even head down that road? Again, we heard some great advice, around, how to approach employee engagement. We look at, think about some obvious things like, I know what's expected of me at work. Popular survey question in many survey environments. But when you think about just, again, common sense approach, so much of the onus for engagement is dropped on the manager, but the reality is that engagement is owned by everybody, right? I've got some ownership. But if you think again about, clarity of expectations, which shows up in everybody's engagement survey, whether it's, I know what I'm doing in the next 6 to 12 months, or, I know what's expected of me at work. The reality is that initially when we approached it, we thought the manager was responsible for creating clarity. But then we realized that clarity actually requires the other side to have that same shared understanding of what expectations were. In other words, they had to come to the table too. And so when I say go along, you can't expect to engage your workforce if you only point your efforts at your managerial population. The second thing is true too, and that is using language that matters. So my kids only asked me once what I did for work. And I told them I used words like engage and execute, and I could tell they just wanted to get back to Minecraft and good luck, Charlie. And then I think I wanted to get back to Minecraft and good luck, Charlie. And here's what's interesting is when you think about language that matters, we use words like, we started using words, this whole effort, using words like engage and execute. And actually, my oldest boy, we had just watched The Princess Bride. And there was a funny scene there where you keep using these words. I do not think they mean what you think they mean. And it's so true as, you think about engage, engage outside of the workforce means something completely different. And it's ironic because it means the precursor to a big commitment, right? But when we use it in the workforce, it's all about the commitment, right? How do I get the commitment of the workforce? And then, of course, when you think about execute outside the workforce, it does not mean what it means. But it does relate to some of my kids' games. So that's my fault as a bad parent. So, in other words, use language that matters. Try to connect with your people using language that matters. And I say this, that use language that your kids can understand, because it's not about dumbing down your employee population. It's about meeting them at their level. I don't need a white paper to tell my kids who their best friends at school are, okay? It's just they know who their best friends are. I don't have to take that same concept to work and then say, okay, look, no, really, you have a best friend. Some of you knows where I'm going with that. Okay, and then the last point here that I have is what works here probably won't work there. Invest the time. It really does take time to create a great, solid employee engagement program. If you're truly focused on engaging your teammates or your employees, take the time and invest the time and do some investigative work. Again, I've finally come to the place where I stopped talking about engaging my workforce. Today, at SunTrust, we're moving away, finally transitioning away from our employee engagement efforts, and we're talking about building great days at work, because that resonates with everybody. Again, it's common language. It's something everybody can resonate with, and it's important to SunTrust. It's adapted to the culture. We're using our questions, not somebody else's questions, because they're important to us. And we know what really taps into our people. SunTrust is, as a bank, warmth is our currency, is one of our, value statements. And it's because we've built that around connecting people outside of the bounds of the business speak and the human capital and the engage and the execute. We're using words that matter. So that's all for me.